Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So today we're going to talk about the recent Severlin Court of N Q&A from this past Friday. So Severlin, the executive producer for DDO, occasionally will do these little shows with Court of N where they'll often give us more insights and more details or give us some breaking DDO news, things like that. So let's go over everything that was discussed. I'm not going to go over every single little thing they talked about. So if they talked about a topic and didn't have much of consequence to say about it, or if it's just been repeated many times, in the community or in my past news videos, I may not mention it. But there will be a link in the description of this video to that video so you can watch it, and I'll give you timestamps as I go through this so you can get the full context in that video so you can quickly reference that. Also, by the way, I did a video yesterday going over Update 62, so go to that video for all the Update 62 stuff. I'm not going to talk about that again in this video necessarily, okay? All right, let's start at the 3-minute, 12-second mark in that Q&A. They talked about revamped Chronoscope. So Legendary Chronoscope is confirmed. If you watched my last DDO news video, we talked about how there was a little slip of the tongue there by Cordovan a month or two ago where he accidentally basically let everyone know that it was coming. But in any case, they did confirm it this past Friday. So another really important thing that they confirmed about Chronoscope is that, and this was not in the Q&A, this was on the DDO forums this week, Cordovan confirmed that Legendary Chronoscope will not replace either the heroic or the epic versions of current Chronoscope. So for those y'all don't know, typically they only offer 2 versions of content. So if they upgrade something to legendary, they usually get rid of, say, like the epic version. But in this case, they're not going to do that. There's going to be 3 versions of the Chronoscope. So how are they going to do this? Because as far as we know, the game can't handle more than 2 versions of a quest. Well, they're probably going to do, my guess, and they didn't say this, but my guess is they're going to code it as a separate quest to get around that. So yeah, that's cool. So we aren't losing any version of the Chronoscope. So I think that's an awesome thing that lots of people will be happy to hear. Still a weird choice, Chronoscope, since we already got legendary versions of all that stuff with the Shard Seal Scroll update a couple years ago. But and they didn't say much here about the loot, but I guarantee you that there will be legendary versions of all current existing loot in the chest. I just hope they add a few more things to make the raid a little more enticing. Okay, let's talk about challenge dungeons. So at the 3-minute, 35-second mark, they talked about challenge dungeons in an upcoming winter adventure pack. So there's going to be an adventure pack later this year, and it's going to be challenge themed. So what does that mean? Basically, the way that Severlin described it is I took it to mean not like actual challenges, like the timed ones and the KS challenges. Maybe that's what he was talking about. He wasn't completely clear. But what he did talk about, and so it still could be that. But what I'm thinking he meant challenge in terms of difficulty. So here he said there's going to be 4 challenge dungeons, which will be more challenging than normal dungeons. You'll have to find clues to unlock them, he mentioned. That I don't know what that means exactly, but I guess we'll find out. But the one big thing about these challenge dungeons is they will be in-game focused, so there's not going to be heroic versions of those dungeons. It's going to be a in-game only adventure pack, apparently. So I think that's going to allow them to focus more on designing these dungeons with in-game in mind. Like they could make design changes they couldn't make otherwise if they had to make a heroic version. That's what I took from it, but there won't be heroic versions of that. So I'm excited for that. I'm mainly an in-game player, but I understand those y'all who are mainly on, say, like the heroic or racial reincarnation grind may not like that as much, since you won't have a version of that content to play at lower levels. All right, let's talk about the theme of the new, or the setting of the new content. So at the 6-minute, 40 seconds, they talked about a poll they did, and I actually did the same. When I saw them doing this poll, I did the same poll on my own YouTube channel, which I'll put on the screen now. But they did a poll earlier this year where they asked players where they would like to see the next batch of content set. They said the ones that did the places that did the best in the poll were like Planescape, Mithranor, and Ravenloft. And Severlin specifically talked about Planescape here. I think that's the direction they're going, since Severlin did mention at the 34-minute mark in this Q&A, he mentioned that Planescape stuff is being worked on by WotC, so Wizards of the Coast, the owners of the D&D license. So they like to, and we've seen this before in DDO, they like to kind of match what WotC's doing. So it seems to hint from what he's saying that they're going to go in the direction of Planescape. So yeah, be looking forward to that. Was not confirmed. They didn't confirm anything, but it seems from his comments that they're going to go Planescape with the next content. And they didn't say actually which content they're talking about. They could be talking about the adventure pack this winter. They could be talking about something next year, a new expansion for next year. We really don't know. So we'll have to just wait and see. All right, at the 8-minute, 10-second mark, they talked about new races, archetypes. So they said that they want to do more archetypes, and then after that, at some point, get back to universal trees. So Severlin did say specifically that the next archetype is probably going to be Barbarian. He said there's been some good ideas that they've seen floating around, and they would like to implement that. So one thing that also they've talked about, and I've talked about this in prior news videos as well, is they've mentioned that they're doing something for great clubs, and they haven't mentioned that they haven't said specifically what, but there was a comment by a dev that we went over in a prior news video on great clubs. They're going to buff them in some way. So if those y'all don't know, great clubs are kind of useless right now in DDO. They're really behind in terms of the two-handed fighting weapons. So could this be a archetype that focuses on great clubs for Barbarian? It would make sense. They didn't say that in the Q&A, but based on all these comments, I would not be surprised to see that. And I think that would be really cool. So maybe maybe we'll see that. But in any case, we are going to get a Barbarian archetype in some form. Several, they didn't confirm it, but he said probably going to be Barbarian. So that's what we're going to see most likely. Okay, at the 9-minute, 30-second mark, they talked a bit about Night Revels. See my video from yesterday. I went over this more, and I had pictures of the new Night Revels stuff. But there is new stuff in Night Revels, new rewards. Candies are back, even though the form of them is kind of a lot worse than prior years. But candies are back. There's also one thing they did add in this Q&A is there's no new dungeons for this year for Night Revels, but Severlin mentioned there's probably going to be new dungeons next year. So that's something to look forward to for next year. Okay, at the 14-minute, 38-second mark, they talked about the Reaper Tree revamp, and they've talked about this many times in the Q&A. So they said it's still on the table to do it. They want to do it. They just haven't gotten to it yet. Severlin said probably next year. At the 31-minute, 15-second mark, they talked a little bit more about this. Severlin talked about a rank system and how it would help lag. So right now, apparently, Reaper enhancements are the burden of that is on the character, and they want to shift that around on the back end so that there's not... that is not the case. So that would help lag because you wouldn't load in stuff on your character. Like every time you enter a dungeon, for example, it would be, hopefully they can do something to take that load off the character so that the game, has less load times, less lag, things like that. So that's cool. So we might, even with the Reaper enhancement revamp, whenever that happens, probably next year, we'll hopefully see a lag decrease as well. And I think we've seen some decreases in that area with some of the lag work they've done recently anyways. But yeah, that should be cool. They keep talking about also a rank system. So they haven't confirmed it, but I guarantee you guys that's what they're going to do. They've been talking about it constantly for years now. So we're probably going to see when they do that in a revamp, they're probably going to get rid of the Reaper enhancement trees and replace it with a rank system so that you just hit rank 1, rank 2, rank 3, etc. And like everyone gets the same stuff rather than having to choose from specific enhancements in the Reaper trees. So they want to do that because then they can implement some kind of power sharing system, which would be much harder to do if they did have the trees. So that way they could hopefully reduce the gap between like new players and veterans who have like 156 Reaper points. So, okay, at the 17-minute, 44 seconds mark, they talked a little bit about the Daybreak All Access Pass. So they said that SSG games are not included in the Daybreak All Access Pass. If you don't know what that is, so SSG is owned by Daybreak Games, but there is some All Access Pass that's offered by Daybreak that gives you, it's a subscription and it gives you benefits to a variety of Daybreak's games, but DDO and Lotro are not a part of it as of right now. Several mentioned there'd have to be some significant account work done to make that happen, and as of right now, it's not going to happen. So could it happen in the future? Maybe, but as of right now, it's not going to happen. It is not the case right now. Okay, let's talk about two-factor authentication. So they've talked about this in prior Q&As, how they want to implement two-factor authentication. So what that is when you log in, you can set two-factor authentication so that like you have to log in, but you also have to like click on a link that they email you just for increased security to prevent your account from getting hacked. They said they ran into a technical issue, so they have been working on it, and they ran into a technical issue involving the game launcher. So this feature has been delayed, but they're still working on it. It just might take more time than they thought. All right, at the 20-minute, 25-second mark, they talked about revamped race graphics. They said they want to update looks for human and maybe elf halfling, but Cordovan mentioned like really focused on human, and they've talked about this a bunch as well in Q&As, but and he didn't mention certain other races that he talked about before, like PDK, for example. He mentioned human specifically here, so maybe human is their main focus now, but it seems like human is the main focus, and then other races like elf and halfling are going to be after that if they have time. But he also went into talking about some of the benefits of doing this, like half elf, for example. He talked about how way more players started playing half elf after the visual update, because before the visual update, half elf was really, really ugly. It did not look good. It looks quite nice now. So it does matter to people. People like their races to look good. Not everyone is like me and enjoys playing a super ugly character. All right, 24-minute, 55-second mark. Several talked about one of these hot topics. This is raid loot, and can it be bound to account? So here's a poll I actually did on my YouTube channel, and it seems like most people in the community want raid loot to be bound to account. Several, however, said that it's unlikely to change. It's going to be bound to character. And guys, it's always been bound to character. I seriously doubt they're going to change their stance on this. They have a few reasons for this, and you could certainly make a great argument as to why it should be bound to account. But their reasons for keeping it bound to character is they want to make raid gear like a very special thing. They also want you to have to run. They also want there to be benefits for running a raid on an alt instead of just running everything on your main character, because that's one of the issues. If it was just bound to account, you would have basically no reason to not just run everything on your main character. And right now there is a little bit of an incentive. So like, for example, I have been looking for the ring from Killing Time for my favorite soul, and my favorite soul is much worse than my cleric, because my cleric's my main character. But when I run Killing Time, I actually have a reason right now, because it's bound to character, to switch and actually play my favorite soul caster in that raid. So that's one of these things where they want you to be able to feel, they want you to have to play other characters other than your main character. So I mean, certainly there's good arguments around that, but yeah, that's what they feel like, and they want raid loot to be a special thing. The other thing is that I'm surprised people bring this up so much, because it's already not really an issue, because raid runes, with a few exceptions such as the optional loot and skeletons in the closet, raid runes can be used to purchase any raid like item in the game. When it comes to the newer raids, except for the really old raids that don't support it. But for the newer raids, anything that's relatively new, you can already buy everything you want with raid runes anyway, and raid runes are bound to account. So it's already not really an issue. It being bound to account, just bound to character as now, just gives you a little bit more reason, because if you pull it in the chest, you can actually have it on that character. And I personally am fine with bound to character. I mean, I wouldn't care that much if it went bound to account, but I kind of agree with bound to character. And I know you guys, obviously, based on that poll, you all disagree with me on that, and that's fine. But I do like having like that reason to actually run alts. And the other thing is, if it was bound to account, I don't think we would see nearly as much passing of loot in chests, which is kind of the nice thing about bound to character, because if you're running a raid on that character that you want that loot on, people are gonna be much more likely to pass it, since they can't really loot it and give it to an alt anyway, since it's bound to character. So yeah, guys, there's the whole spiel on bound to character. I understand why you all want it to be bound to account, but I seriously don't think they're ever going to change their mind on this. All right, so let's talk about at the 28-minute, 30-second mark, they talked a little bit about lag. So Sev talked here about lag for quite a while. He essentially said that the lag work that went into effect last update, among other things, has on their end, from what they're seeing from their stats, they're seeing improved, they're seeing better performance than there was from their metrics. And I have to say, I mean, with a couple exceptions, I've been playing on Orion lately, and it's been pretty laggy over there. But for the most part, I think lag has been in a decent state overall, not in every place in the game, but overall has been pretty good. So I think it's better. Obviously, lag is not ever going to go away completely, and Sev mentioned that here, but they think it's better, and they clearly want to keep it. It's just a reasonable state. They don't want to get too bad, and I think they've been doing a pretty good job with some of the changes. I know some of the changes they made last year seem to have really improved things. So yeah, that's good. All right, at the 32-minute mark, they talked about inventory and bank storage. So they said there will never be more backpack space. So this means the actual stuff on your actual character. So the inventory tabs on your character is they're never gonna do more, just because they've reached a point where they don't, for server load reasons, they don't want to put more on your actual character. However, they said they're definitely interested in continuing to offer more character bank space, so actual bank space, not on your character, but bank space and shared bank space. So that's probably what we'll see. I mean, they've introduced more things, like with the new Morgrave expansion. There was some bank space offered there. They had the whole Black Panther bundle things that had additional bank space there. So I'm sure as we go through, as time goes on, we'll see more and more shared bank and character bank space being offered, but we're not going to see more inventory tabs on your actual character. Okay, at the 37-minute, 30-second mark, they talked a little bit about cosmetics and will they ever get more specific. So, for example, someone asked about if we could, like, specifically change the look of like a bracer on your character's left arm, for example, like from the one on the right arm, or could we get more specific with cosmetics? Several said that there's so much gear in the game that they probably won't do that since it would take too many dev hours to implement. So yeah, I don't think we'll see anything more like that. But yeah, all right, the 39-minute 9-second mark, they talked a little bit about UI upscaling. So they've mentioned this constantly over the past couple years. They said they are working on it, but they didn't say much more other than that. I mean, there's this is something they need to do forever with the 4K coming to the game and just needing icons to actually scale. Because right now all of the UI, for example, is just fixed, and the icons and the art icons are just fixed images. So they are working on scaling that, but they didn't give any more details. All right, 39-minute, 40-second mark, they talked about merch, and this is something people have asked about like for years and years and years. Why is there no merch? So for those who don't know, you can't actually buy any DDO merchandise. So you can't go buy a DDO t-shirt or like a plushie or whatever. You can't buy anything like that. And several said that they've shied away from that and not done merch because it would mean competing with other D&D license holders. So that's their reason. And I know Cordovan has mentioned that there's been certain like legal reasons they don't have the rights to that for the license. My thought on that was like, all right, why can't you just acquire those rights? Is it that hard legally? And maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but yeah, they are shying away from it from that reason. I've never heard them talk about this before. That one of the reasons is because they don't want to compete with other license holders. But yeah, so I think in terms of merch, yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get DDO merch. There are a lot of content creators that do have merch, though, so that's probably what you'll have to do in terms of merch. I don't have any, but yeah, maybe I should make some. I don't know. What do you guys think? Anyways, 40-minute, 30-second mark, they talked about Linux. So Linux, several said they don't have the engineering resources to support Linux, so that's likely not going to happen. So sorry, any of you Linux users. At the 41-minute, 3-second mark, they talked about the follow command. So several said they're probably not ever going to implement a follow command because that would mean running into issues with botting and making it easier to multi-box. And there's already a Dungeon Helper third-party application that does work, and you can do that. I wouldn't advise doing that, and I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't use that feature of it because I think that makes me uncomfortable because I think that really that might dip into the violation of the terms of service. You could certainly argue that it's not, but I feel like it probably is. So I wouldn't advise doing that. And SSG has never really come out, by the way, and said if that feature Dungeon Helper is okay or not. They just haven't said anything. So, and I've also asked them about it and not gotten any response. Basically, the response to me was, we have no comment. So I wish they would come out and say that because a lot of people, I do see some people using that, and it would be nice to know if that was something that would get you banned or not. Okay, at the 42-minute mark, they talked about AI. So someone asked them about AI, if they use AI in their games. Several said that they don't plan to use any AI for their games. So AI is not being used, nor is it being planned to be used in DDO's development. All right, at the 46-minute, 15-second mark, they were asked about raid length and longer raids. Someone said one thing that was pretty interesting here is that they want to keep things under 30 minutes, which generally is the case. There's some longer raids like Strahd, like Temple of the Deathworm, but generally they keep things under 30 minutes. I think the question was more asked because most of the raids we're getting lately, with the exception of like Skeletons in the Closet, have been really, really short raids like Hunter Be Hunted and Fire Over Moorgrave. And I personally would love to see them do more longer raids along the lines of like Skeletons in the Closet, because it seems like, especially with like Fire Moorgrave, to me, when I play that raid, it feels like they like skipped making the first few phases of the raid and we just got the infight. I would love if there was like more raids like Skeletons where there's like 3 distinct multiple phases and they maybe went like I definitely am perfectly fine. I would love to keep them under 30 minutes as well. But like I would love to see more raids that are like 20 to 30 minutes instead of like 5 to 10 minutes. So hopefully we get more of that in the future. It's probably just I'm sure it's just a man hours thing for like more grave. But I want to see longer raids, so I hope they do more longer raids, or at least just more raids in general. All right, at the 47 minute, 40 second mark, they were asked about raid flagging. They've talked about this a lot, but we'll go over it again, and they said essentially the same thing here. SSG's stance over the years has changed. So right now, their stance seems to be that they don't ever want flagging in raids ever again. That's why we have not seen a raid flagging mechanic implemented in the game since, I believe, Too Hot to Handle. So in every time they've been revamping these raids, they've been removing the flagging requirement. So I don't think we're ever going to see a raid again that requires flagging, and they do seem to want to remove flagging every time they revamp a raid. It's just what several talked about here is that removing flagging is not necessarily a simple thing to do. There are sometimes it's easy, but sometimes with some raids, it is something that is buried deep in the coding of the raid, and it's actually quite complicated to remove the flagging. So they definitely want to do that. Based on the response here, I would say they definitely want to do that, but it's just a matter of like time and man hours and how complicated it would be to remove flagging for something like Heroic Abbot, for example. Okay, let's talk about the last thing here, 49 minute, 20 second mark. They talked about VIP benefits. And so there's a whole long history with this. They've been, in 2022, they had daily gold rolls for like 9-10 months. They talked continuously about upgrading VIP. Really early this year, they threw out their ideas and plans for a VIP monthly reward system, and Severlin just talked about this again, that it's obviously been delayed, and said it has been delayed again because engineer resources, he's saying, had to be shifted over to deal with some issues involving the DDO store. So that's one of the reasons they have done this month, by the way. They have brought back daily gold rolls just for 1 month. So that's one thing they're trying to do to hold VIPs over, because this has been delayed. So who knows when we'll get this, guys? Probably next year, hopefully the first half of next year. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this video, guys. So yeah, let me know what you think about any of these topics. Again, that's covering everything that was of note here. There might be some little things that I didn't cover, but that's generally the gist. But the things I didn't cover is just because they might not have said much of consequence. But yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take care.